Hi guys, Ryan from the Second Tier Podcast here with a quick message just to say that this episode was recorded before we got the tragic news on Wednesday night that George Baldock had passed away at the age of 31. Best known for his time at Sheffield United, won 2 promotions in his time from the Championship as well with the Blades. Just brilliant in that right wing back position, which he really made his own over the years at Bramall Lane. We, of course, send our best wishes to his family and friends because this is just awful news. And let's be honest, it's been a shit few months, really, with Matthias Sarkic in the summer and Sol Bamba very recently as well. And now we've had this. So, yeah, as I say, send our best wishes to his family and friends. And please enjoy the show. We haven't got any Championship football to talk about because it's an international break, but there is still some news which we have got regarding Cardiff's new manager. We'll talk about that, and then we'll get on to some of the questions which our beautiful listeners have sent in. So as I say, Cardiff still yet to appoint a new manager, but they've finally got a bit of insight into who they may be considering. Wales Online is reporting Reading boss Rubén Sellés is someone who's been a, quote, central part of the club's hierarchy discussions. Other managers reportedly in contention include Slaven Bilic, Steven Schumacher, Ryan Lowe, Mick Beale, and the current caretaker, Omar Ritza. Charlton boss and Cardiff fan Nathan Jones is not thought to be under consideration, which feels like quite a big one. But I mean, that goes back to what you were saying not too long ago, Justin, where he keeps putting out the signals that he would like Cardiff to come and flirt with him, buy him a drink and what have you, but he always gets turned down. Yeah,
it's a strange one with Nathan Jones. I think it's one of them where I think if the club's in different hands, Nathan Jones gets a job, but for whatever reason, the hierarchy just don't fancy him, despite him
the reason that's been given is because he's got a long contract at Charlton.
Yeah, compensation will be an issue, but if good managers go out and pay it, but then again, Cardiff will sack him this time next year. So yeah, they're probably right in not paying compensation.
No. What do you think of Rubén Sellés, Justin? I think that's a really interesting link there.
He's such, I think, an up-and-coming manager, certainly a very good and talented coach. I know Southampton fans were very respectful of him when they came down. Obviously, he took caretaker charge. Was it from Nathan Jones, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. There was a lot of respect there. And what he's done at Reading since then is essentially fight a fire that is never gone out, but he's kept it to one room, if that makes sense.
Yeah. He's fighting a fire with a small child's bucket of water, isn't he? That you see on the seaside, that kind of thing. He's just doing that and trying to throw it over the fire. But, there's only so much you can really do.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there's been a lot of conversation with failed takeovers at Reading, and therefore I think from Rubén Sellés' point of view, he's certainly going to be exhausted by it because he's the front man, and unfairly so as well. But I think from a footballing perspective, the club's not been able to recruit. They've had to promote a lot of young players into the team, and he's done a very good job in the circumstances. That's what you've got to sort of measure him up against, is that parallel of how good of a job he's doing and the circumstances that he's certainly up against. I know people look at it and go, well, Reading is 16th in League One, but actually for them to actually have won 4 games so far this season, fucking remarkable.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people will look at what he did at Southampton and didn't really turn the tide there, which is a bit unfair, really, because Southampton were pretty shocking all season, not just under Rubén Sellés, but he has done a fantastic job in the time that he's been at Reading, and it may not grab the headlines, but he really has. And I think a really important thing here is what we've said on a few occasions, just in the Cardiff job, not the most attractive, that I think will be available this season. But to someone like Rubén Sellés, who is, constantly being stabbed in the back, I think he will absolutely love to take on an opportunity like that. And I think it would be a really good appointment by Cardiff, actually. Quite a sensible appointment, strangely, by their standards. Because of everything that he's had to deal with in his time at Reading, I think will transfer over to Cardiff. Of course, Cardiff are not in any similar situation to what Reading are. But I think it could transfer over really well and really see them stem the tide of being any fear of going down this season over the course of the season. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I think when you consider, and it's quite sad really that Rubén Sellés, I think he's taken charge of 2 clubs across 3 seasons, and each of those seasons he's been fighting relegation. He's got the tools to inspire, if you like. I know it didn't work out at Southampton, but they showed a lot more fight, organisation, good coaching while he was in charge. Not to discredit Hassan Huttelaw or Nathan Jones, who preceded him, but he showcased a lot of good coaching qualities while he was there, and he's harnessed them at Reading and really thrived with them. And again, when you mention the fact that Cardiff isn't an attractive job, I think, to more established managers, which is why they're having to shop around in the bargain bin a little bit. Those managers who have left clubs, who have been sacked by other clubs, that's the ballpark they are batting in at the moment. Because, as you say, it's not a job that will be inundated with high quality applicants who are at the top of their game. Rubén Sellés, I think, is that balance. I think he's someone who's coming up. I think he's someone who deserves an opportunity, but he's not quite had it yet, and probably unfairly so, really.
Yeah, 41 as well. Still quite a young coach, really, isn't he? So, as I say, I think it'd be quite a strangely sensible appointment by Cardiff. What do you think of the other contenders who I mentioned there, Justin? Slaven Bilic stands out to me. Obviously, it was a bit of a mess at Watford, but I mean, Watford were a bit of a mess at the time. So I think that could be quite an interesting one.
Bilic is a weird one. He seems like a very Cardiff appointment right now, where they go for a very random foreign manager. That being said, I don't know how random Bilic would be in this case, because he's got experience in the Championship. His West Brom team was good. They did tail off the end of that Championship season, but they still got promoted in the 1920 campaign. I like him as a guy, and maybe as a coach, it's just whether or not his candle's burnt out, if you like, from a managerial perspective. Schumacher, I don't think is right for the job, mainly because I just don't think the structure of the club is right. Ryan Lowe, I think, would be a good appointment. Is he ready for it? I think he maybe needs a little bit more time off. Mick Beale.
I don't think Mick Beale would be a bad appointment for... If Cardiff were not in the situation where they're in, where they're bottom of the table, I think he'd be a good appointment for someone like Cardiff. Or at least I'd be willing to give him the chance. I just get a bit worried because with Cardiff being in a pretty tenuous position right now, I wouldn't want to put all my chips on him.
Yeah, and I still think he's very inexperienced. It's so weird saying that, because he's obviously took the job at QPR, went to Rangers, and then was at Sunderland, but I just don't think he's really proven himself anywhere. I know you can say that he did what he did at Rangers, but it wasn't exactly spectacular, and he got sacked within 13, 14, 15 months. I can't remember how long it was now off the top of my head, but it certainly wasn't a glorious spell. So I still think he's got a lot of points to prove as a head coach. So I wouldn't be confident putting him in charge, as you said. So I'm certainly agreeing with you. I'd probably stay away from Bill.
Let's get on to some questions then, Justin. We've had a lot of correspondence from our listeners, but just a reminder, we always prioritise questions from our Patreon members, first of all, our Martin Patreons, as we call them over there. So if you've not signed up yet, get involved, patreon.com/second tier. And also, if you have sent in a question which we haven't answered today, we will be doing, hopefully, another Q&A soon. So don't you worry your little head. We said we wanted to do more at the start of the season. This is the first one we've managed to get around to doing, and it's in October. So hopefully we'll be able to do another one sooner rather than later. But let's get on to it. Skeeter on our Patreon has the first question. They ask, how did you two become such Championship nerds? Justin, how did we become such Championship nerds?
Well, I think it helps to be nerds generally. As you can see with your background, there's a Mario, there's a Black Panther head, Captain America, and all sorts. And of course, as listeners well know, I love Star Wars. So that's 2 qualifications for being nerds. As for the Championship, we both, I don't think it's a secret anymore, we both grew up as Derby supporters. Therefore, we spent a long time following the Championship. And therefore, we were exposed to drama every week. And it made us fall in love with the Championship, not each other.
Yeah, it meant what? It meant that we had a close eye on the Championship for many years, didn't we? And then, ironically, Derby got relegated in the second season that we were covering the Championship after they had been in the league for 14 years or something like that. But, I mean, how can you not love this league when you've been in it for so long, just because of the unpredictability of it all? And then I think when we first started, I was a keen admirer of the Championship, but now I am a full-blown Championship nerd, to the point that I spend very little time actually looking at the Premier League, the Champions League, anything else like that. And so I usually have to try and catch up with other podcasts giving me the lowdown on what's going on, because I don't have enough mental capacity to take in any more football in my brain. But this league, Justin, I think over the years it's been very kind to us, hasn't it, in the amount of content and entertainment it's been giving us, and it never fails to deliver. And how can you not love this league?
I think that's it. I think as well, like growing up in the peak years of it, where it wasn't overly televised, podcasts weren't really a thing back in sort of the mid-2000s either, or certainly not on the same platforms as they were. So getting good Championship content was very, very difficult. You had to rely on. Peak? I think it was, yeah.
It was the peak in terms of your nostalgia, but
all right. There's a debate for another day, I think. But we had to get good content from magazines and newspapers. Which is sort of, it feels like I'm banging the drum of the good old days sort of thing, which I'm not. Yeah. I'm not. But I think what that does is it just heightens that, sense of quality. And again, you get a lot of players who become those cult players in the Premier League, start out in the Championship. Your Darren Bents, your Shefki Kuchis. I'm just sort of
two very random players to start off with there, but fine. I know what you mean. Just you kind of see some real young stars get born in the Championship, don't you? Like your Jude Bellinghams, for example, would probably be a better example than Shefki Kuchi.
No. Have you ever seen Jude Bellingham belly flop from a height of 6 foot? No.
Hey, maybe we can make it happen. But there's just so much to love about this league, and that's why we're here right now talking about it. Let's move on to Paul Thomas's question on our Twitter. Which new signing who wasn't playing in the Championship or Premier League before has impressed you the most so far this season? I've got a few which are worthy of a mention here, Justin. I mean, first of all, Harrison Burrows was the one I chose as my permanent signing of the summer in the last international break, and he's lived up to that billing at Sheffield United so far. Ibrahim Sissoko at Plymouth has really given them some star quality in attack. They do seem a bit reliant on him, but he's really impressed me so far. And I'd like to give a shout out as well for Gonzalo Franco at Swansea, who's looked a really good player in the middle of the park for them. I've got one big one, but I want to hear who you're going to say first of all, Justin.
Annoyingly, I was going to say Ibrahim Sissoko, because he's been such an electric spark. They're both the same thing for Plymouth going forwards.
You could say he's been a spark.
Yeah, but he's not been an electric spark, because, as I say, they're the same thing. You can't have a spark without electricity. Actually, you can. I'm getting the science of it. Never mind. He's been great for Plymouth. He's been absolutely fantastic. And I think, the type of goals he's scored, he's given a directness, and, he's been very clinical in the chances he's faced. He's got some big goals as well. Just feels like, he's going to be another aspect where Plymouth lose a very good loan player in January, because of course he's on loan until then. Another player who has impressed me is very close home at Derby, David Ozo. I know he's been injured for the past 4 games, but in terms of a 19-year-old stepping into midfield, him not being in that central spot for Derby feels like they're more vulnerable. And I know he's got all the physical attributes to thrive at this level, but he's added a real element of steel into that midfield, and protective, and also he gets around the pitch very, very easily. I will add as well, we've had a lot of players who didn't really excel last season really step up to the plate this season. Your boy, your Sainzes, your Josh Madgers, players like that who, as I say, were sort of finding their feet a little bit, maybe injured for parts of last season, come in and really step up this season. So it does make picking out a new signing quite difficult.
Yeah, David Ozo's someone who's really impressed me at Derby as well. I think him and Kenzo Halmeen as well, who's another new signing at Derby, who's been playing alongside Ozo when Ozo's been fit, has really caught my eye too. But Ozo, considering he is just 19, looks like a real player, because he's a big physical specimen, isn't he? But so good on the ball as well. So it looks like Derby may have found a real gem there in in young David Ozo. The player who was the clear outstanding one for me in this regard was Aidan Morris at Middlesbrough, because he looks as if he could be an unbelievable find for them. I will admit I didn't watch too much of him at Columbus Crew in the MLS. I know, how could I? So I didn't know too much about him when he came in, but he looks like a really intelligent player. Just 22 as well, by the way. He is an excellent ball-winning midfielder, disrupting the other team. But his passing is excellent as well. So he's got a lot off and on the ball, and he's perfect for a Michael Carrick team in that sense. And his partnership with Hayden Hackney in midfield could be one of the best in the division as time goes on. So for £3 million, Borough look like they've got a brilliant player on their hands with him, Justin. Have you been impressed with him as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that probably overshadows trying to come up with the Middlesbrough players is the fact that their form has been relatively inconsistent because they just don't put chances away. But that doesn't mean they're not, in a good place where they are creating them. And Aidan Morris is going to be central to that. I think he's the perfect find for that Michael Carrick system where it does feel like there's a lot of emphasis on attack because you've got a player who can do both parts of the game. We were just talking about David Ozo at Derby. Doesn't feel like his technical profile is at the same level as Aidan Morris's. David Ozo's got that defensive element. Aidan Morris has got both of them. So as I say, he just feels like that perfect blend you've got in a midfielder who can protect the back four, do all the dirty work, but he's also very, very good in his passing.
Absolutely, Peachy. Let's take a quick break, shall we? After that, we'll get on to some more of our questions from our beautiful listeners. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. So we've opened the post box, going down, putting our hand in there, getting some letters out. And here's one of the letters, Justin, we've got from Daniel Muir on Twitter. Do you think anyone will ever break Reading's points record? Something which has come up in the past couple of seasons in particular, Justin. But what do you think? Will Steve Coppell's men ever be topped in the Championship?
No, it won't. That's such an easy one for me. I think the reason why it's so easy to come to that conclusion is purely down to we've seen teams come down into the Premier League packed full of quality. Leicester last season, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, Jamie Vardy, just players who had no right. Vardy was old, but players had no right playing in the Championship at that point in their careers. Fulham under Marco Silva. Newcastle under Rafa Benitez, for God's sake. The man won a Champions League. All of these teams with elite coaches and squads good enough for Premier League survival. I wouldn't say they got nowhere near it, but I don't think they ever got near it. I think they ever got near the 106. It's not all about quality, it's mentality. And I think that's a very difficult thing to cultivate in a squad, that's what makes that Reading side so special. Yeah,
it is amazing that record has now stood. I mean, that was the second or third season in the Championship, wasn't it? Yeah. Since it got rebranded. And it still stands to this day. I think if anyone was going to break it, it was that Leicester team of last year. If they're not breaking it with that squad, which I think in terms of just sheer quality has got to be the best squad we've ever seen at Championship level and maybe for a good few years to come. If they're not breaking it, then that record is going to be standing for a long time, I think. I don't want this to sound like a bit of a dig at the Reading team, because a fantastic team it was. But I do think there is kind of different standards at the bottom of the Championship now. I think you look at the bottom of the division now compared to how it was back then. You had a lot of players who probably shouldn't have been playing in the Championship, whereas now you've got so much talent filtering down from the Premier League, down from the top half of the Championship into the bottom half. And that means that the so-called easier games that modern day teams are having to face aren't actually as easy as perhaps they would have been back in, the 2000s. And that's just one theory I've got, but don't let anything take that away from the fact that Reading 106 points is a ridiculous achievement that As much as I've tried to tempt fate with it being toppled in recent years, it just doesn't look like it's going to happen because, as you say, Justin, no one's really come close.
No one will topple the couple. Absolutely not. I will just take umbrage with your point a little bit.
Okay.
Mainly because I actually think there's a correlation there between the standard of, you are right, that I don't think the teams below, sort of in that lower mid-table, bottom half of the table, in 05-06, I don't think it's as good as it is now. At the same time, I think the quality at the top half of the table and the players that are coming down into the Premier League is also much greater. Because you've only got to compare the forwards of teams. Mitrovic was part of that Newcastle and that Fulham team. Is he better than Dave Kitson and Kevin Doyle? Yes, he is. So I think that it's that comparison, isn't it, that you can sort of bring out and say, well, actually, no, the quality that's coming down is better, but also the quality at the bottom has also improved. So yeah, there is a correlation.
That's a really fair point, actually, Justin. I don't really have any response to that because you could also make that argument as well. So if anything, that just stands up Reading's achievement even more. Let's go to this question from Connor on our email, and kind of feeds into the question that we just had, actually. Is this the most competitive championship in several years? What do you think, Justin?
Yes and no. I thought last season was competitive because you had 4 teams going for the top 2 with 3 or 4 games left. Similarly with relegation, it wasn't tied up until the final day of the season, so that's competitive. That being said, I think the definition of competitive that maybe Connor might be referring to is the quality of the league and the quality of the players and the teams within the league as well. If it's that definition, then yeah, I do certainly think it's probably the most quality we've had in this division. I think there's certainly a closer mould from sort of the team finishing top to the team finishing 8th. Because I think when we were doing our pre-season predictions, I genuinely think anyone we put in that top 10 could finish in the playoffs, could finish in the top 6 very, very easily. I don't think we could have said that the season before.
Well, no, you're absolutely right there. It's funny because I've just come off the back of doing my league table predictions, my updated version. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, it just suddenly occurred to me when I was making that, picking who's going down this season is an absolute nightmare. Anyone who gets all 3 teams correct deserves one hell of a pat on the back, because it is a bloody nightmare predicting who's going down at the moment. And then when I was getting towards the top, I was like, I could quite feasibly see any of my teams in my top 7 getting in the top 2. I cannot remember the last time that was the case. So I genuinely think this is, dare I go as far to say it could be the most competitive championship we've ever seen, because, as we were just alluding to, you look at the mid-2000s, it was possibly a bit more unpredictable than it is nowadays, but the standard of some of the teams near the bottom was pretty poor. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, anyone can beat anyone on their day, couldn't they? And picking who's going to finish where is unbelievably tricky. So I think I may make the argument, just in that this is possibly the most competitive championship season ever. Yeah,
I think another thing worth bringing up is that splurge of clubs spending way beyond their means, sort of in between 2015 to 2019 or 2018, whatever. I think a lot of clubs have learnt from that, been stung by it, have learnt from it, and their recruitment's a lot smarter, which what that does is, in a couple of years down the line, make teams much more competitive. Your Sheffield Wednesday, they've had to learn, Derby have had to learn, Middlesbrough have had to learn, Blackburn are getting smarter, Norwich have, having to cut their cloth as well. Similarly with Watford, they're going through a bit of a transition where their recruitment's got to ease up. I think clubs are getting better at recruiting, they're getting more modern in their models, and I think what that does is, as I say, does create that wider balance of competition in the Championship. Great example is Sunderland, and how they recruit. So I think that adds to that element of it being more competitive in the Championship.
I think it's also got to be said, the 3 teams who have come down from the Premier League this season, Burnley and Sheffield United are strong, but they're not as strong as the 3 teams who came down last season. I think that goes without saying, really. And meanwhile, you've got teams who are traditionally mid-table ones, like I'm thinking Bristol City, Swansea, those kind of teams, they have got some bloody good players in their ranks nowadays who have just had to filter down a level because they're not getting in at the top level because, they've got Premier League talent in them. I mean, Scott Twine at Bristol City had to leave Burnley because he wasn't getting enough game time there. I think that's a key example in that. So you've just got so much quality all over the division now. When before, teams were just trying to grind out what they could with what they had. And it just makes it an even more appetizing thing, doesn't it? Who can finish where, anything's possible. Mm-hmm. And again, that's why we love this league. Ralph on our Patreon has this question, Justin. Which team from our pre-season table predictions do you wish you could change? Any regrets with your pre-season league table predictions, Justin?
Don't live life with regrets, ladies and gents. No. Actually, I don't. Yeah, no regrets. I mean, there are teams in there where you think, yeah, maybe we should have given them a bit more benefit of doubt. Blackburn, we predicted to finish 20th, but at the same time, I don't think there'll be any Blackburn fan for starters and any other content creator within the Championship that would have predicted them to finish higher than 16th, if you like. But they look nowhere near a side who are going to struggle this season, but it could all change. Could quite easily say Luton, but again, if things do pick up, they've got the quality of the squad to push for the top 6, should they pick up very quickly, similarly with Coventry. So no regrets, as I say. Not going to live life that way, Ryan.
No, and so you shouldn't, Justin. So you shouldn't. I mean, the league table predictions are just speculative punts every season,
bit of fun,
aren't they? It's just a bit of good fun, isn't it? Really,
until we get it right, and then
we get it right. I mean, I will. If no one else is going to say it, I will. That the Ipswich prediction to finish second last season is the greatest prediction anyone has ever made in the history of football. But that's just what people have been saying out on the street, as far as I'm aware,
including Sam Morsey
and Sam Morsey. So. I don't look back at the league table predictions with any regrets particularly. I mean, it's coincidental that Ralph asks this because I have just released my updated league table predictions yesterday on our YouTube. So go and watch the video and subscribe if you haven't already. But I've done the maths and the team I've moved the most is Luton and Blackburn. If that goes some way to answering your question, Ralph, in terms of is there anyone who we would change? But in the video, I have made some bold predictions. Justin, have you got round to watching it yet? Is there one in particular that caught your eye?
I did watch it, and the first thing I'll point out is that I was losing my head at times. So I sympathise with the listener on this occasion. There was a couple.
Justin, I think if the shoe was on the other foot, I'd be losing my head as well. But go on. What's the one that you have the most the most grievances with?
The most is Portsmouth.
Okay, fine. I was not expecting you to say them. Fine. Okay, why is that?
I'm not going to give it. Well, I'll give it. You predicted them to finish 20th, right?
Yeah.
A side that who's yet to win a game after 9 games is not in the bottom 3. It's a surprise.
Oh, Justin, come on now. You know what I'm going to say to this. You know
what you said on the video.
Exactly. It's the most difficult start any team has perhaps ever had in Championship history. I think.
Yeah. But
that's a very, very harsh take from you.
No, it's not. It's not, because you've got Derby in 21st, which, look, you're sticking by your guns. But again, I would probably put them higher because I think their away form is fixable.
Okay.
But let's see how the season pans out, and if they pick up injuries, things could get problematic for Derby. But a side who is yet to win a game after 9 games, not being in the bottom 3, I think is just absolutely bonkers. Because yes, they've had a bumpy start, they've had a rough ton of games. Ugh, my heart bleeds, tears running down my eyes, violins, everything. Sorry, Portsmouth fans, that's really condescending. This is aimed at Ryan. This is aimed at Ryan. But confidence, you're not thinking about the intangibles, the damage to confidence this has on the players. They went into their first winnable game, if you like, fixture-wise, against Stoke, and they lost 6-1. And then they had to follow it up with a game against Oxford, where they did create a fair few chances but didn't take them, and it turned out to be a missed opportunity for Oxford because Oxford absolutely panned them in terms of chances as well. It's a worry for me that Mourinho's faced a lot of troubles this season, and the numbers tell us that things have got to improve drastically, both defensively and going forwards. I'm not confident in them picking up a win anytime soon, let alone staying up.
I think you're getting very carried away with the first 9 games. Because
it's 9 games.
It's 9 games, but
we're 3 games away from the first quarter of the season.
7 of them were against teams who are just of a much higher standard than Portsmouth, Justin. And yes, I know it's not great, but I mean 5 points from them is not actually that bad. Yes, they're still looking for their first win, but I mean it would have been remarkable if they won any of those first 7 games, really. I just think John Mourinho is still a bloody good manager based off what he achieved with Portsmouth last season. I think they recruited well over the summer. And they're getting players coming back from injury as well. I mean, they've missed Connor Shaughnessy a fair bit recently, and he was fantastic for them last season, and including that first game against Leeds as well. So, you know, there's other players I could bring up there as well, but I think they've just got much more in their armoury than they have shown in those first 9 games, and I don't think we should be too worried about them just yet. Who was the other team out of interest who you were questioning?
I mean, it was probably Derby as well. I wasn't really.
Okay.
I was quite unmoved with the top half. I think
you thought Derby should be higher.
I think so. Yeah, I'm coming around to the idea that maybe they could be a lower mid-table side. I know it's quite a jump, but I think goals are going to come for Jerry Yates because whilst he hasn't scored yet, not great. He's been very, very important into how Derby play. David Ozo is going to come back into the side as well once he's back from his hamstring strain. That should improve things drastically. And I think as well, there's still a lot to come from the likes of Kento Guidmean, among others. So I think there's room for Derby to grow. I'm still not overly convinced by Paul Warne. I think we'll get to February and there'll be a few injuries that start to come to the surface, which will impact things because that's what happens with Paul Warne teams. He runs them into the ground, which is fine, but that's where that tactical naivety, I think, comes into it for him.
Okay, I was just surprised because I thought, if anything, you were going to say they should be in the bottom 3. So I'm pleasantly surprised that they should be higher. But I'm cautious about you giving too much away, Justin, about the rest of my league table predictions. If you want to find out, go look for yourself. Second Tier Pod on YouTube is where you can find that video. And we'll wrap up the Q&A, Justin, with this question from Jamie on our Patreon, who has a great question. Centre-back Royal Rumble involving Championship centre-backs. Who wins? Who are you going for?
This is perfect because I've been watching, as I say, this is completely unrelated. I didn't know this question was coming up, but I've been watching a lot of wrestling.
All connects.
Yeah. I've got a few in mind.
Okay.
I've got Aaron Cashin that comes to my head because he throws himself at everything. And I think you need that in a Royal Rumble because you need to be brave. You need to get wrestlers over the ropes. You need that in a defender. But you've also, you've got to take your bumps as well. And I think Aaron Cashin is going to do that. I think Matt Clark would be a bruiser in there as well. It doesn't move very well, but I can imagine him dropping a few leg drops here and there.
Lots of headbutts, I think.
Yeah. Harry Suter, though.
I think Harry Suter's giving me Big Show vibes.
Yeah. He's got a mullet as well, so there's a lot of wrestler flair about him. But the fact that he's Australian, so naturally he's there's a fighter in them. I
mean, first of all, he plays for the Australian national team, but he's actually Scottish and also stereotyping much.
Nothing on the Scottish national team either. But there's a fieriness there, and I think as well he's 6'6". How hard is it getting a man who's 6'6" out of a ring? Like getting the Undertaker out is hard. He's a big lad. Big Show, as you mentioned, very difficult. Great Khali, he's a big lad. Kevin Nash, massive. They can't get them out. Well, they probably can, but it's harder. It's harder.
I think Harry Suter would be the kind of guy that when the Royal Rumble's going on, you hear his music and everyone turns around and goes, "Oh no," because he's just such a big boy. Although the common thing is with WWE is they always go on about how, oh no, it's the Big Show coming into the Royal Rumble. Oh, here comes Kane. But those guys never win it. And the excuse that they've started using in recent years is because they're so big, they've got a target on their back now, and then everyone teams up and to get them out of the ring. So I try to avoid anyone like Harry Suter or I know Jake Cooper at Millwall, you know, those kind of big boys. And I went a bit tactical with this, Justin. I went with Luke O'Nien at Sunderland. And my thinking here is, I can't remember what year it was, in one of the Royal Rumbles, I think it was Jerry Lawler, hid under the ring for the majority of it and then came out at the end to try and win it. And I could see Luke O'Nien doing something like that, some sort of clever tactics where he steals a win right at the end. So I think Luke O'Nien could be my dark horse in the old Royal Rumble.
Yeah, he adapts, doesn't he? You've only got to look at him, you know, positionally on the football pitch. He's gone from being a centre mid to a full back to being a bloody good centre half. So he's adaptable to his circumstances. So I think he's certainly one that will thrive. Like he'd be in the crowd, wouldn't he? Just hiding away, as you say.
Yeah, he'd be just keeping himself out the way and then sneaking in right at the end to throw whoever it is who thinks they've won, Harry Suter or whatever, lob him over the top rope. He's the winner. He's absolutely loving life.
He's sly as well.
Luke O'Nien is my Royal Rumble winner for me.
I think it's a good shout. Boy, his signs as well. He's got a bit of the dark arts about him.
Oh, we only care about centre backs here, mate. Listen to the question.
That's true. That is true. But just saying.
I was going to say actually. Speaking of Jerry Lawler, I think he's blocked me on Twitter. I can't remember why this was, but I think he might be the most famous person who has blocked me on Twitter. I'm trying to think now, but I don't even remember ever saying anything to him. But he has blocked me. He is the most famous person who's blocked you, Justin.
I've been blocked by Stan Collymore.
Oh, who hasn't?
Yeah, but also I think I've said it before on the show. I've been blocked by Burnley.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So I never see the transfer updates from Burnley. Their extravagant, incredible transfer announcements. I never see them.
No.
I have to log into a Burner account.
That's a shame, but you should have thought about it when you were giving them a dog's abuse for trying to steal Craig Bryson from Derby all those years ago. But yeah, Jerry Lawler blocked me on Twitter. That's a good question to put the listeners actually into. Who's the most famous person who's blocked you on Twitter? When I say that, it can't have been because you were giving them shit. It must be someone who has blocked you for reasons that you're completely unaware of. But the more famous, the better.